Welcome back to the HPP podcast. I'm Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. We did a two-part special last week, our college preview show, which featured an in-depth look at the Big 12 Conference with reporter Matthew Postins. You can listen to those two episodes or any other HPP episode at hoopsprospects.com. Please check it out. Today we are shorthanded because the star of the show, Drew Barton, is attempting to make the Stanford basketball team as a walk-on. After watching the Stanford Cardinals' sloppy loss to Wisconsin, they definitely could use a spark on offense. I am joined, however, by Maverick Swenson, who, like me, has been watching a ton of college basketball. Today, Mav and I will be discussing the biggest news in both the NBA and college Division I hoops. We'll be doing our first draft stock report of the season. We'll also be joined by Ohio State center Zed Key, and also be joined by Bruce Pascoe, who covers the Arizona Wildcats for the Arizona Daily Star. Mav, how you doing today? Anything exciting to report in your life?
Well, Rich, I think both of our personal lives are consumed with basketball, so it's safe to say that we've had exciting personal lives recently. I mean, we've just been spoiled with basketball. I mean, it's been great, both with the NBA and college. So, just been great overall, you know.
What do you make of Drew attempting to make the Stanford basketball team as a walk-on?
Oh, he's got a great chance. I mean, fantastic shooter. I mean, you know, you got to work a little bit off the dribble, but I mean, he'll provide that spark they need.
Right, and multiple times over the summer, he compared himself to Klay Thompson. So, of course, Klay Thompson played at Washington State in the Pac-12. So, in our weekly F1 update, which most people, that's the only thing they tune in for, is our weekly F1 update. I must sadly report that Max Verstappen's win streak was broken in the Brazilian Grand Prix, thanks to Lewis Hamilton pushing him off the track. Needless to say, Mercedes fans, I'm not a Hamilton fan who drives for Mercedes. So, so that's our F1 update. And that's the end of the show. Thanks for joining us, folks. Okay. Before we dive into college basketball, let's get caught up on the biggest news in the NBA. Kyrie suspension is over, quote unquote, over. He's completed the 5 games. He has the list of 6 objectives he must complete. And it's probably unlikely that he's going to, complete all those objectives. So it's been 7 games, actually, he's missed. What are the 6 conditions? I think he's met some of them so far. Can you read off the 6 conditions, Mav?
Yes. So the 6 conditions are as follow: apologize/condemn the movie that he tweeted, $500K donation to anti-hate causes, sensitivity training, anti-Semitic training, meet with ADL/Jewish leaders, meet with Josiah to demonstrate understanding.
And the commissioner, wasn't it meeting with the commissioner one of those conditions as well?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, he did meet with the commissioner. He did meet with the commissioner. He did meet with the owner. He did vow to pay the 500 thing. So I guess
apologize.
The only thing, and I know the players have filed a grievance on him, and I'm guessing, unless you know the details, I'm guessing that their complaint is you can't force somebody to say something in order for them to be able to work. I mean,
the list is also very long too. I don't think we've ever seen something like this ever for
it also, like this. I mean, let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just say he is anti-Semitic. Now, of course, the Nets don't have to employ someone. I don't think there's any law that says they have to. I don't know. I mean, can they break their contract based on his personal beliefs?
I'm not sure, but from what I get from this list, I think they gave him this list because they thought that he couldn't complete everything.
Or he wouldn't. Yeah.
Or he wouldn't. Yep.
Right. I mean, yeah, I suppose, on the other side of the coin, let's say you're not anti-Semitic and they're saying, I mean, I don't know. Is it over the top what they're asking him to do? I don't know. It just seems kind of crazy. I mean, either you think the guy's a racist and you fire him, I guess it's your choice whether you want him to work for you or not, whether you pay him or not. I think they still might be on the hook for that. I mean, unless there's writing in the contract that says, you're not allowed to be racist. I mean, I think they're going to have to pay him.
There is a noticeable difference on the basketball court because they look much better without him.
Right.
I mean, and I will say this, Ben Simmons does not. And that's another conversation because even with just Ben and Kevin, Ben still does not look like a competent offensive player.
No.
But their defense,
well, defensively too.
Their overall team defense is much better. I mean, they're holding opponents to 91.2 points per game, and with Irving, they were giving up 118.8 points per game.
Wow,
that's a pretty noticeable difference.
Yeah, that's like 30 points. That's almost 30 points.
And there's been some games where Ben hasn't played or he's came off the bench. So this is, I mean, this is just with Kevin and role players, and they look significantly better.
Yeah.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah, and the other thing is it's allowed Cam Thomas to play.
Yes.
And what's the knock on Cam Thomas? That he can't play defense or he won't play defense or whatever. No one's ever questioned his ability to score.
No.
So with Ben Simmons, is it physical or is it mental?
It's got to be both at this point. I mean, he does not look anywhere close to where he was defensively a year and a half ago. Not even close.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a mess there. So let's move on to Philadelphia, who I believe the Sixers now are moved up to 7-7. Joel Embiid scored 101 points in 24 hours, 59 points on Sunday night against the Jazz, 42 points on Saturday night against the Hawks. And this is all with James Harden being down with a foot injury that's going to sideline him for a few more weeks yet. So I guess my first question is, how much of an impact have my negative tweets about Joel Embiid spurred him on? Because, if you notice his play since I started tweeting negatively about him last week, and then all of a sudden, boom, he woke up. So how much have I contributed personally, and your comments last week? And can he keep this up? Obviously, the answer to that is no.
Well, he must have your tweet notifications on because that's the only explanation for seeing everything. But yeah, he can't keep this. He can't maintain this. I don't think he's in good enough shape. And I mean, 59 points at 42 points. He did score 42 against Capella, but
right.
I mean, Utah. I mean, they're running with rookie Walker Kessler and Kelly Olynyk. So
right.
So it's kind of a free game for him.
So you might, people, if they didn't see my tweets, basically we've been talking about Embiid's, looking slow, and the tweet I tweeted out the other day is, so far this season, he's had 9 transition possessions in 14 games. And of those 9 possessions, he scored 4 times and was fouled once. The other 2 were turnovers and 2 missed shots. So, but in his defense, in the summer, apparently he was suffering from plantar fasciitis, which contributed to him falling out of shape. Now, apparently that issue is gone, but he's dealing with a sore ankle and a sore shoulder, which he claims sometimes makes it very, very difficult for him to raise his arm. So my biggest issue with Embiid, in light, he could score 2,000 points, and I'm still going to have the same problem with him, is that, and the Atlanta fans on Saturday night, or the Atlanta, excuse me, not the fans, their announcers, were actually making fun of him and saying, no, they were. It's Dominic Wilkins and whoever the other two guys were in the booth. And they were saying, people talk about how Ben Simmons, caused the Atlanta comeback. Remember when Atlanta was down and the Sixers just needed to win one of the two last games to clinch the series, and they didn't. And they pointed out in those two games that Embiid had 16 turnovers. And they were also pointing out that, that when he puts the ball on the floor, they were saying, fine, let him put the ball on the floor. He turns the ball over as much as he does it. And they're right. I'm not talking about post dribble moves. I'm talking about when he tries to act like a guard.
Exactly.
And the other thing that they were making fun of him about was, they were saying, like, look at this. He's bringing the ball up the floor. He's 7'1", and he's bringing the ball up the floor. That's what they have guards for. And I'm sorry, but I have to agree with them. Is, the injuries after a while, it just gets old. It just gets old.
Yep.
This is a kid. He once was a kid who looked like the second coming of Akeem Olajuwon. Now you can remember Akeem was always super fit, always ran the court really well, could defend, pretty much anybody because his feet were so fast. And Joel had that look when he was at Kansas.
Yep.
And then, when we finally see him as a pro, we're like, holy crap. Now he looks like, Joker, his body is totally changed. He doesn't look like Akeem was just like he wasn't thin, but he wasn't too big, he wasn't barrel chested, and so he looked more like Patrick Ewing than he did Akeem Olajuwon when we finally saw him as a pro. And I'm thinking, well, he'll eventually he'll wear that off, and he'll get back to being, a thin, thin or not thin, but really fit center, but it's never happened. And so the other thing that bugs me is, when you see him put the ball on the floor and he ends up kicking it into the stands, or when you see him not playing defense this year, is, this is a guy who's always running his mouth. He says things like, I want to be defensive player of the year. I want to be MVP. I want to win an NBA title. Well, you know what? It starts off with being in shape. And up until this point, everybody in Philly has been okay. The guy does really try hard and everything else, and we've been okay. But I mean, I think we've just reached a point where we just can't deal with it anymore.
In Philadelphia, I mean, they've pointed problems everywhere else. I mean, they went through and said, Brent Brown, you're the problem. Brought in Doc Rivers. Ben Simmons, now that was an issue. And I mean, they got him out, and now they have Tyrese Maxey, James Harden. I mean, you couldn't imagine a better guard tandem for Embiid. And you still have Tobias Harris. You brought in PJ Tucker to be your dog. I mean, there's such a great roster around him, and it's just the same issues. It's the same issues like what you're saying that we've seen each season. And like you said, you don't care if he scores 2,000 points. The turnovers are an issue. The body's an issue for me. The defense has always been an issue, especially on the perimeter. I mean, the effort is not there. Slow feet. And And this whole thing, it's a very common thing they like to do. It's a trailer pass to Embiid at the top of the key, and he likes to go right on it every single time, and usually it doesn't lead anywhere. I don't understand why that's a go-to, but it is. And the pick and roll hasn't been there with him and Harden because I think Embiid wants to ISO and Harden wants to run the pick and roll. It's frustrating because
that's another thing. I mean, you don't see he's never been a dominant role player. You know, I mean, not rolling. I'm talking about pick and roll. You know, that type of player. You know, he's kind of slow to come off the pick, and
And guess where that leads? That leads right in the mid-range area. So he's settling for mid-range shots constantly instead of using that body that he brings in every time and just muscling him in the paint.
How many times do you actually see him just like hang out in the dunker spot? He doesn't. He loves to hang out around the key, and that's fine if you're an excellent passer, you know, like Joker.
Yes.
But you know, Denver runs their offense through him that way.
Yes.
But they don't. You know, he's not the same type of player. Once it goes into him, that's pretty much the end of it. You know, he's a black hole that way.
How do you feel about his foul hunting recently?
Oh yeah, that's another thing, right? Yeah, I'm sick and tired of that. You know, when he takes a dive on the court and then he lays there complaining with the ref as the play's still going on.
Yes.
Oh my God, that is, that again, if you want to be MVP, if you want to be Defensive Player of the Year, if you want to win an NBA championship, you don't lay around on the ground and take 30 seconds to get back on your feet while the play is going on. Yeah, it's exasperating. And, he could be so much more, either with this body or with a different body. And I'll tell you what, the lighter you are, the less you're going to run into feet injuries and back injuries and ankle injuries. But
absolutely.
So I just, until I see him play differently, I just don't want to hear his proclamations that he's going for Defensive Player of the Year or he's going for MVP, because it's not going to happen because, he has Joker, for example. I looked up his transition plays. Now he's not excellent in transition, but he's had like 3 times. They basically have had the same number of possessions on the season, and Joker though has 3 times as many transition possessions. Now, and we're talking about a slow man. He's not Damian Lillard getting up and down the court. He's a 300 some pounder. And, but he gets up and down the court. He has 3 times as many transition possessions as Embiid. So, I'm going to keep on tweeting about Embiid. Other people must be like, oh my God, what does he want from the guy? He just scored 101 points.
we have to look past the whole number thing, because we know that it's not contributing to what he should be contributing to.
Right.
And that's winning, because that roster that y'all have in Philadelphia, that is a championship level roster.
Yeah.
It has everything.
Well, I'd like to see a couple more pieces on the bench, because some of the guys on the bench are useless, but
I mean, those guys that you could bring off the bench, you could get at the trade deadline for really cheap. Especially guys like, I thought Clarkson would be someone who would be cheap. Obviously, that's not the case.
Clarkson doesn't want to leave Utah.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to leave Utah anymore either. Now, I'm sure in the offseason
he said it recently.
Yeah, but in the offseason, when they were losing everyone, I'm sure he felt different when that Donovan Mitchell.
Actually, I read recently. The players were kind of saying the same thing. There's been a lot of talk about how the Jazz end up so good. The Jazz always, the talent was there. I've been saying that all summer.
You did, yeah. You called it, and they believed it as well. It was just everybody just assumed that all these trades meant that they were going for the, Wembanyama sweepstakes, but
unfortunately, they actually made really good trades. They got some really good players. So, yeah. All right. So moving on. Lakers are off to a 3-10 start. LeBron has been more out of the lineup than in it. Dennis Schroeder and Thomas Bryant are still hurt and might be back soon. Russell Westbrook continues to come off the bench. I'm really sick of this story. The only thing enticing about Westbrook at this point is an expiring contract, so it has to go to a team that has some contracts that the players that they no longer are interested in. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I like say that. Of course, the Nets would probably love to unload Ben Simmons, but how the hell would Ben Simmons help the Lakers?
Yeah.
So things like that. I just don't really see any hope here, and yeah, I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I think that we talked about the Spurs the last show and how they were a big surprise, but they've I think they have lost 5 straight or something like that ever since.
Yeah, well, I predicted that was going to happen.
Yeah, we all saw it coming. I think that they could make a move for Westbrook. I think they had the contracts with McDermott, and Jakob Poeltl, Josh Richardson. That makes them work.
I personally, I don't know if you want to give up on Poeltl. Poeltl's a pretty good player.
That's what I was going to say too. He's one of the top defensive centers, statistically at least.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Nobody's going to give up anything of value, or they're not going to give up. I just don't see it.
Maybe if they unload those picks.
Maybe somebody like Detroit, who's definitely not doing as well as they thought. And, and they have like Bogdanovich's contract and they extended that, and they could probably put together a couple other their vets, that are making a decent chunk of change together, and maybe they would do it because that would allow them to sign a real free agent next year, somebody who would really fit into the program. But yeah,
Dallas. So I know Dallas has the pieces too. I mean, they have Bertans and Dwight Powell and Reggie Bullock. None of those 3 guys have been contributing anything to Dallas. And I'm sure that Dallas would hop on.
Well, I'll tell you what, Luka definitely could use some help. I mean,
oh my, you don't have to tell me.
I mean, I'm worried about him getting burned out.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah. So also, Cam Johnson is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks with a knee injury. Correct? Right?
Yes.
In Phoenix. So, that was a team that we were critical of their depth. And of course, they don't, part of the problem, another team that we were critical about their depth and some of their moves was Portland. And, both of those teams lack a G League team. I don't understand it why this day and age, they could even probably combine and, to at least they're both on the West Coast, to find some city that maybe would host a G League team, would help their depth. But currently anyway, with the fact that Jay Crowder is not with the team, and was, supposed to be traded months ago and still there. Now they don't have Cam Johnson. I mean, they're really looking thin. Chris Paul, has been in and out of the lineup.
I believe you called this too.
Huh?
I believe you called this too.
Yeah.
When we talked about Phoenix, you specifically mentioned that if Cam Johnson were to get hurt, there'd be some real issues, especially with this Crowder situation. So,
right. And Johnson actually, going all the way back to his college days, has always had injury problems.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I suspect
they're gonna have to make a move.
They have to make a move. They got to do something with Crowder, or they got to bring Crowder back.
And how would that go?
I don't know. I mean, they're working with Ayton, who they screwed they screwed up that situation. They're surviving with Ayton. They're 8-4, so it's not like. But I don't think they're going to stay. I don't think they're going to stay above 500 for long. I mean, if they do, they're going to end up burning out people. They're going to end up playing. People like Mikal Bridges and Booker, and big minutes, and yeah. So lastly, we have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's going crazy, averaging about 32 points a game, 6 assists per game, 2 steals per game, about a block and a half per game, shooting 54% from the field, 38% from three. So obviously, we talked in the summer about he was a potential all-star, kind of an all-star on a fringe all-star, and I think obviously he's achieved that next level. Yeah. The thing of it is, the question now is he going to be? And we've been asking this question for about 2 years. Will he remain healthy? The OKC is a surprising 6-8 right now. Can he wait it out? You really, even when they get Chet Holmgren back next year, they're probably, maybe they eke into the play-in game next year, but they're probably still like 2 or 3 years away from being a serious NBA, Western Conference title contender.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does the team make a move? I mean, they certainly don't need more draft picks, and you'd hate to see this team get younger.
No, I don't think they're going to make a move. I think they're just, prioritizing Jalen Williams, his development, because he's going to be a good player too. Just such a solid cutter, good defender. Once he gets his shot, okay, he's going to be a really good pro. But Shai, Rich, he looks really like he looks like a superstar right now. Right. And if he can keep this up, maybe not 30 points a game, but 26, 27, 6 assists. He looks like a top 5 guard, and I don't think that he would be bumped down at all if he just abstains like that. This little points per game, maybe like a 4-point drop off around there, because he looks incredible, and his efficiency just from the mid range and the paint, and he's been incredible finishing around the rim, and his mid range is out of this world. He has one of the best mid range shots in the league. And he's shown improvement from the 3-point line, especially off the dribble. Even with a little bit of more of a set shot, he's able to get it off against most defenders. He's been extremely impressive. I think he'll 100% be an all-star this year. And I remember a Thunder insider tweeting that most people think that Josh Giddey is going to be the superstar in OKC, or Chet Holmgren, or maybe a future draft pick. But he said that they already had a superstar there in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and he could not have been more right.
Well, I guess the question to me is, when I look at that roster, you have Josh Giddey, Trey Mann, Shai, Jalen Williams, and if they were offered, an excellent young forward, or because that's the one thing that this team doesn't have. I mean, if they were offered, somebody who could complement Chet well down the road, like say a Jabari Smith, or maybe even somebody, Jabari Smith would be a good example. I mean, should they pull the trigger on that just based on the other guards that they have? Or do you think
I think so. Them? Yeah, I think so, but I'm going to flip this question back onto you. What if that forward is Victor? They have the assets, they have the draft picks, they have the young assets to make a trade happen if they don't get the number 1 pick. Could you see Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama play on the same front court? Do you think that works?
I'm going to say no. But yeah. I just think they're too similar.
It's a good point. Yeah, they are very similar. But they're young. They're extremely malleable. I mean, I think that Holmgren has fantastic defensive instincts, and I think that's one thing that kind of varies with both of them. I'm not really sure if Victor has the defensive instincts, but offensively, we've talked about Victor before previously on the show. I'm a big fan of him, especially offensively in that mid post area, and he's even taken off the dribble in France right now from the 3-point line, creating out there. So that's, I mean, I think that it could work, but it's like the thing I mentioned previously, where if you draft two of the same position that are both young, one's not really a vet. They're both coming in, egos kind of high because they're high draft picks. It's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I'm kind of with you on that one, but it would be interesting because Jabari Smith is the same age as Chet, so it's kind of the same thing with that too. But could you imagine maybe like a Holmgren? And man, like, I mean, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of, well, and they also have Usman Jang too, who
Right.
looks like a prototypical 3-and-D wing. He's kind of probably bound for success. He has beautiful shot mechanics as well. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but I could definitely see them making a move for a forward.
Right. The thing of it is I just don't know if this team wants to continue to get younger. I think now's the time to start to go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you can give Victor, fine, but I just don't know if you want to give away one of your proven pieces that you've already did nice job. You got Shai, and he's playing the way you want him to, and he seems to play really well with Giddey. Let's build on that. That's what I'm thinking. Let's not start giving away a really good piece for something that may not turn out to be so good,
a cheap option that's not exactly too young. I think that John Collins would really fit on this team, especially in a pick and roll. If Chet Holmgren is able to space the floor consistently, that's going to be a big question mark they're going to have to ask themselves. Can Holmgren space the floor at the 3-point line consistently? Because I think John Collins would have a lot of success playing in the pick and roll next to Shai and Josh Giddey. So they also have Lou Dort. We forgot to mention Lou Dort as well.
Right. I don't think you want to give up on Dort either, because
no,
he's not super expensive, and he's an elite defender
and improving on the offensive end too.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to college basketball, and we're going to start by reviewing some of the bigger matchups from the first week of action. And there haven't been too many big games so far. And last week in our preseason special, we listed out, when we went through our top 25, we listed out the most interesting first game on the schedule was going to be. And three of those games have already been played, and two of them had surprising results. But the one that didn't was Gonzaga and Michigan State. It was Gonzaga won 64-63. They went with a small lineup, using as Drew suggested they would at times. They used Julian Strother as the 4, Drew Timme as the 5. Timme had a really nice second half. Wasn't the prettiest game, but
no.
And Michigan State, they as I said last week, is people haven't been talking about Michigan State, but I think they have a very solid team, and I think we saw in that game that they are going to be a team to contend with in the Big Ten. The player I was most impressed with was Matty Sissoko, their center. He's a junior. He was a top 40 recruit, and he, I don't know, it's a little early to talk about his pro potential, but he certainly is a banger. He can rebound, he can block shots, he can rim run. So he really made an impression on me. But any thoughts on that game?
Well, the biggest thing was the spacing. We talked about this, pre-show, but that first half spacing was atrocious for Gonzaga.
Right. And I explained to you that game was played on a boat, and if you got too close to the edge, you would fall in the water. So you had to watch your spacing.
Because, well, if that was the case, Rich, see, because for the viewers, I'm going to give a timestamp, and you can go back to it, and you can see it. 8 minutes left in the first half. Gonzaga, for some reason, had 3 guys in that left corner with a Drew Timme isolation in near the right block, but still really in the middle. I don't know. There was so much. I felt like there was a lot of miscommunication because the very next play, they tried to go with a high-low action to Drew Timme. And for some reason, they threw the ball to him when it was a clear double team. That right corner was open. It's just the chemistry just didn't seem to be there that first half.
Right,
and
right.
I'm going to ask you this.
Well, they're missing Andrew Nebhard, and he ran the show. Exactly. He ran the show, and they don't really have a clear-cut replacement, I don't think, for him right now, and that could be problematic.
Well, Rich, I was going to ask you this question because that's exactly where I was leading this to. Without Drew Timme, they had a total of 4 assists on the team without Drew. Drew was their leading assist guy with 4 assists. The other guys combined had 4 assists. Do you think that's an issue? I mean, from what you saw?
Yeah, definitely. Their guards, 2 of them are sophomores that didn't play a lot last year. The transfer coming in, Malachi Smith, really isn't a pure point guard. He didn't play well either in 30 minutes. He had some moments. But I'm not. Yeah, I just think in general they need somebody to run that offense. I mean, there were a lot of times where Timme actually brought the ball up the court.
Yeah.
So it was definitely the Drew Timme show. And actually, Cisco, they really made their run when he got in foul trouble. He was really doing a nice job on Timme, when he wasn't in foul trouble. So, So the next game played on the same night was Temple and Villanova, and Temple upset Villanova, as we kind of hinted that there was a possibility last week. Games played at Temple. Villanova was missing their 2 best players because of injury, one being Justin Moore, who we're not even sure we're going to see this year, though. He is up and running, so to speak, but doing individual work. That game, was. My thought is just this didn't look like Villanova team. It really did not look like a Villanova team. There's so much of Caleb Daniels, a 6'3" guard, was basically posting up constantly in the paint. And there was very little ball movement. You're so used to seeing Villanova making the extra pass and working for a completely, wide open 3 or something of that nature, and you just didn't see it. Last night, Delaware State gave them fits. And I think at one point to start the game, they were 0 of 18 from 3. I also saw in the Temple game that at least for a little bit they played zone, and I was like, Villanova playing zone? I haven't seen that since Rolly Massimino was their coach. Villanova has significant trouble, starting with that they don't have a true point guard. They don't have anybody to replace Colin Gillespie. That was supposed to be Justin Moore, and Villanova is in trouble, and nobody's really shooting. They have a couple young guys that they're giving playing time here and there, but not a lot, that they're trying out. None of these guys are also we're not talking 5-star guys. We're talking, 3 and 4-star guys that, that are sitting there. So, their best hope is probably little Mark Andrews. He's a freshman, 4-star. but hasn't played much. And I'm not sure why they insist on playing Arcidiacono. I think it's Chris. It's obviously Ryan's younger brother. I'm not sure why they insist on playing him, because he was like a 3-star guy, and he's just not Villanova quality point guard. It's really looking bleak for Villanova. But hopefully they'll get their guys back. And any thoughts on that?
Well, even if Justin Moore does come back, I've said it previously as well. It's an Achilles tear, and no one comes back from that immediately the player that they were before. It's going to take time for Justin Moore to really get back into form where we're used to seeing him. So even if he did come back this season, which would be a blessing, because it would probably be around about less than a year, maybe a year since he tore his Achilles. If we even saw him this year, he would not be the same player. So
yeah, good chance of that.
It'd be tough.
Yeah. I will say the Temple's backcourt duo of Damian Dunn and Khalif Battle played well. Battle is in our top 200 on our draft board, which was updated yesterday. He was there before, by the way. I didn't put him on there specifically for that game. But, their backcourt's looking good. I think Temple, given that the, American Athletic Conference beside Houston seems to be a pretty wide open race, Temple has a good chance to maybe be the second best team in that conference. Next game was another upset, and that was Colorado went to Tennessee. It wasn't on Tennessee's home court, but it was in the state of Tennessee. Yeah. And Colorado, coming off an embarrassing loss to Grambling, beat Tennessee handily.
Yeah.
78-66. And interestingly, 4 of their starters didn't start the game because the coach was so upset with them from the previous game that those guys didn't probably come in till like the 10-minute mark.
Yeah.
And at the time, the game was probably close to being tied. And to me, it wasn't so much that Colorado played that well. It was that Tennessee was just dreadful.
It was horrible to watch. Yeah. It wasn't even this close.
Yeah.
It wasn't even this close.
And they couldn't hit a shot. And we've learned from, last year that when Vescovi isn't hitting, Tennessee is usually in trouble. And he wasn't hitting. He was really having a rough night. And nobody else was really hitting very much either. Drew and I picked Tennessee to be a Final Four team. I'm not about to write them off. But the one thing that's concerning me is they had Vescovi playing a lot of point guard.
Yep.
Zakai Ziegler did not start the game. And so they bring in him, off the bench, and Vescovi doesn't seem comfortable. This is not uncommon for a guard to move to the point and then other aspects of his game, suffer. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I really think Tennessee needs to start Zakai Ziegler, and get Vescovi rolling again. So the other interesting games of week 1, actually they were last night, but the Gavitt games tipped off. DePaul won at Minnesota pretty handily, 69-53. Minnesota, of course, is missing Jamison Battle, their best player. So Minnesota wasn't even with Battle. Minnesota's not going to be very good this year, so that wasn't a shocker, really. And then Penn State and Butler had a interesting game. Penn State won at home, 68-62. The one prospect in that game, one real serious pro prospect in that game is Butler center Emoni Bates. He's back after missing all of last season with injury. He's a great shot blocker, good defender, but he's expanding his game. He's developed somewhat of a post game, and he can hit out to 12 to 15 feet. He's gotten more muscular. He didn't have an exceptional game last night, but he's definitely a player to keep an eye on. Penn State's interesting because Penn State was one of the slower paced teams in the country last night, but they're going small ball, probably out of necessity, because for the past 4 or 5 years they've always had a huge center, John Hara, and before him Mike Watkins. And they just don't have that guy this year. So they're going, small ball, like four guards and a forward. And so they definitely play with pace, take a lot of threes. So the other thing I thought was interesting is several conferences have really gotten off to a slow start. And you might say, well, it's early. What's there to be worried about? The problem is right now, because of the way the computer rankings work and the way the selection committee works, is they put a lot of weight on these games. I had the argument last year, if anyone listened to that episode with Mike DeCourcy, that it's kind of ridiculous to put so much weight on these early games. But the one thing that you can't escape is, like with the computer programs, is you can't escape. It's basically, they're trying to compare conferences. Like, how do they match up? So like the GABA games is a perfect thing where, the Big Ten and the Big East get a good sense of how they measure up. But if your conference starts off slow, even if you don't start off slow, it's going to hurt your strength of schedule ranking for the rest of the season. So that's why I wanted to talk just a little bit about what conferences are actually starting out of the gate. And then it's going to affect everyone, whether you're losing or winning. So the ACC is one. BC last night lost to Maine. Louisville is off to an 0-2 start against mediocre teams. And Florida State took it on the chin again last night to Troy State and is now 0-3. Now Florida State was, I think, number 32 in our preseason rankings, but they got some problems. Probably their best freshman coming in is Baba Miller, and the problem with Baba is not only was he, I don't think he was 100% coming into the year, so I think he joined the team late, and I think he had a hip issue, but now he's supposed to miss about half the season because of some kind of benefit that he got. He's an overseas player, and he got some kind of benefit for traveling or whatever, and so he's, because of NCAA rules, he will not be around for half the season on a suspension. They also, one of their top bigs coming in, Deontay Green, was redshirted because he's been slow to recover from an ACL. That was unexpected. They thought they'd have him this season. So Florida State is really, really thin in the front court. But to top it off, and we'll talk about some of these guys a little bit later, but Florida State is just not shooting very well. So, yeah, and especially some of their star sophomores who were like 4 and 5 star guys who were expected to take the next move up. Well, that's not happening. And so Florida State is in deep trouble. Any comments there, Mav?
No, I mean, we're going to be talking about some of these guys later on, like you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, but definitely concerning.
Big 12 is having a little bit of a problem, but I'm not too concerned about this. But OK State suffered a 1-point loss to Southern Illinois. That's not too bad. Oklahoma suffered a 1-point loss to Sam Houston State. And then last night, TCU, a ranked team, that we didn't rank them, by the way. They weren't in our top 25. And we talked to our guest last week about this team, and he was surprised we didn't rank them, but we had a long discussion, so you'd have to listen to last week's episode. But basically, we weren't as much in love with TCU as everyone else seems to be. They suffered a 1-point loss to Northwestern State, and again, they were without their best true point guard in Damian Ba, who is still ineligible because of some things where he first declared for the draft and some mess ups there with an agent. And as our guest Matthew Poston said last week, it was expected that he was going to get a few game suspension and then would be good to go. But I haven't heard any news on that issue, and he remains out. So again, we talked about TCU a lot last week, but so this one isn't a huge surprise. But anyway, it's not good for the entire Big 12 that these teams are losing. But the worst of the bunch might be the Pac-12. The Pac-12, as I mentioned, Grambling defeated Colorado. Texas Southern defeated Arizona State. Florida Gulf Coast defeated USC by 13. UC Davis defeated Cal, and UC Irvine defeated ranked Oregon, another team we did not rank, by the way, or we didn't have them on our top 25, I should say. We will also talk about Oregon at length, but Pac-12 is really off to a rough start. And as I said, so teams that aren't losing, like Arizona and UCLA, when it comes selection time for the tournament, people are going to say, you don't have a good schedule. And they'll be like, well, we played USC and Cal and Arizona State and Colorado. Well, yeah, but they lost to Grambling, Texas Southern, and Florida Gulf Coast. So that's the way that works. So we'll continue this Pac-12 discussion with our special guest for this week, Bruce Pascoe, who covers the Arizona Wildcats for the Arizona Daily Star. Mav and I talked to Bruce a few days ago as he was getting ready to watch the Wildcats host Southern University. All righty. Our first guest today is a friend of the show, Bruce Pascoe, who covers the Arizona Wildcats for the Arizona Daily Star. Bruce, it's great to have you back. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
So the Wildcats are off to an impressive start with a 117-75 win over Nicholls State, and you're getting ready to watch them host Southern University tonight, correct?
Tonight, yeah.
When we last talked, which was last March, I believe, or probably last winter.
Late last season, yeah.
Yeah. But the Wildcats featured 3 draft picks, including 1 top 10 selection. They were closing in on a number 1 seed in the tournament. Of course, Arizona's March Madness run ended in the Sweet 16 versus Houston, and some say they were lucky to get that far. Our guest did actually last week, but he was a Big 12 guy. I don't want to dwell on last year so much, but from a pure talent standpoint, Arizona was clearly superior to TCU and Houston. What do you think went wrong?
Well, they just, it's maybe simplistic, but they just kind of got out-toughed in a lot of ways. I mean, both of those teams are really physical defenses, and they went after him in different ways. Particularly Houston went after him in different ways that, the Pac-12 teams didn't didn't really do as much. And just kind of the way, especially inside in the post, they did some things that really got to Azuolas Tubelis, and he got a little passive against 2 of them. And, as it turned out, TCU, they were lucky to win that game. And that went overtime. They needed some real, first round material from Ben Mathurin to get through that game. Frankly, that's what happened. But they just struggled. I think that what do they call that? No middle defense they play in the Pac-12. They hadn't really seen that before until TCU threw it at them, and they did work on it. But it's just different when you get out there. And of course, you guys know how those first couple of rounds can be when you're the top seed. There's a lot of pressure, and I think that was a little bit of it too. And then they get to Houston, or they get to San Antonio, play Houston in the Sweet 16, and I think they got a little overconfident, thinking they got over that big hurdle and not really realizing. I think all of us were a little maybe, well, Houston got rated at a time, but I think they were probably underrated pretty much the whole season, and with what they can do, and they just got them, and it was kind of almost a semi-home court environment for Houston. They had a lot of fans making that drive over. It was a tough deal, and I think Arizona just got kind of caught in their headlights. And the one thing I go back to on that too was before this happened, KenPom did a note about how no team that's ever been unranked in the preseason that became a number one tournament seed has ever made the Final Four. And so I thought, wow, let's see if Arizona can do that, because his point was that usually you revert to what you were expected to be when you get to the tournament, and or you've got all these high expectations all of a sudden, and it creates a problem. And sure enough, they didn't make it. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
For the record, and this will come up again in one of our questions, but for the record, we loved Arizona here last year. And I think it was because we understood what they had in Mathurin, Tabellis, maybe guys that aren't so much on the radar. And we had them preseason 14th. So in our poll, it's still on the website for proof.
You know what? And that's arguably, based on that tournament, you could argue they probably were about that range. I mean, probably.
Yeah, I mean, they finished in the final 16. So, yeah, that's about where they were.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to pass you over to Maverick for the second question.
Okay, so, Bruce, firstly, I just want to say thank you for joining us today.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, this question is about the rankings. It's a follow-up. In the Who's Prospects rankings right now, we have Arizona at 16th. And, that's really where they're between in the AP and the coaches poll.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, how would you compare and contrast last year's team to this year's team, especially with guys like Mathurin, Terry, and Koloko all departing for the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge talent thing, and all those guys kind of fit in different ways in the NBA, and I think that's why they got knocked down. I have them at 13, I think, in the way when I voted in the top 25, just because, they could very well be a top 10 team again, but they're, going into the year, you can't look at them that way. They did have some pretty good pieces. They loaded up from the transfer portal, freshmen, internationals, et cetera. But, again, losing 3 first-round picks was tough. And I think that they knew they would lose Mathurin. They probably, Terry was actually kind of thinking that he was going to, there was some thought that he was going to come back and just having fun with the process, but he got too far in and, rose up too fast. He had to go. And then Koloko was frankly a little bit of a surprise. They lost him. So I think they expected they'd have a little more even this year, but the fact is that they've got a lot of interesting pieces. They don't have that, explosive wing score like Mathurin, but they've arguably got a little more up front, even without Koloko. So that could kind of shift things a little more, maybe up front, getting a little more out of their front court than even last year. And I think that's probably the biggest difference. But I think based on the fact that we saw them score 117 points the other night, it's not exactly like they're going to slow down and just pound the ball into these guys either. They're going to do what they do. It's just the big guys are going to be a bigger part of it.
We hypothesized that this year and last year, Arizona may have been underrated due to the high number of international guys on the roster. It's our job here.
Yeah.
We have to look at the top international guys coming in, so we have a better feel. Mm-hmm. And even Ben Mathurin, he fell into that category.
Yeah.
So what do you think on that theory? Do you think that's why people keep on overlooking Arizona every year? They just don't know these international guys?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Mathurin got a lot of sort of pub and exposure because he played for that NBA academy.
Yeah.
Certainly DeAndre Ayton did. He came from the Bahamas, but he went to prep school in San Diego, and then Phoenix. Everybody knew who he was, of course. But to your point, yeah, I think certainly the last couple of years you could argue that. I think part of the reason Arizona was not considered that highly last year's because those guys it was a pretty young core coming back from Sean Miller's last team. And everybody, of course, was under the radar that season anyway with COVID. And it was just, and then you had the questions about Tommy Lloyd. Okay, all these great things about him, but can he really do it as a head coach? So there's a lot of questions. That's why I didn't rank him preseason, and I probably should have, like you guys did. I didn't know. There's just too many questions, but and yeah, they did, some international players you were, it is a question. I mean, Lauri Markkanen was a question mark nobody really knew about, but I think, frankly, I don't think Sean Miller even knew how good he was going to be. I think it was just one of those things. They expected he'd be there 2 or 3 years, and he just blew up, and it was like, holy cow. And now you've got Pelle Larsson's been in the Pac-12 a couple of years. People know about him, but I think the guy that strikes me along the lines of what you're referring to is probably Henri Vesar, their big guy from Estonia, and I think he's a terrific NBA prospect just based on the fact that I've only seen him in 3 games in a practice. I mean, but just if he can really pick it up with his size and his ability to move, and his shot looks pretty good. He just, he's got a lot to learn, especially about the U.S. college game, but he could really be there. But there's nobody talking about him as of right now, and we'll see. And
he came up last week on the Hoops Prospects preseason college.
I'm glad you're talking about it because you guys might be the first. I mean, I've been reading all kinds of national stuff, and every time you see national things mentioned about Arizona, they never mention Henri Vesar because nobody knows. And he played, and that's even a guy who played on a pretty high-profile club program with Real Madrid for 3 years.
They're under 18 club. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Mav?
So we'll see. I mean, and they've got a couple other, Filip Borovichinin. He's nobody knows about him. He's not going to probably have a big impact this year, but he could develop into maybe even an NBA player, at least a really good European player that's going to help him on this level. Just it might take him a while. And, Adama Ball, the French kid they have, he was only 17 last year. He's still only 18 as a sophomore. He's starting to show some signs. He's going to be a factor this year. So, and those 2 guys also are not, nobody's talking about them either, except us locally here and you guys probably.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we're just going to stay with the international theme here.
Yeah.
So Hoops Prospects, we are the only site right now that has listed Lithuanian forward Azulis Tubelis as a top 50 NBA draft prospect.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, why do you think that? What's not there not to like about him?
Well, I think, it's interesting. We talk about that all the time in the media. We're like, is he an NBA player? What do you think? What do you think? I mean, he's really, really good, especially at this level. And he's a little more mobile than you might think for his size. And we'll see. I think the TCU and Houston games he's really motivated by those. He knows he didn't play well. He said, when I look at films last year, I didn't rebound at all. Well, he did rebound, but I think what he means is he wants to rebound more and just be a little tougher all the way around. So you've got that. I think, I don't know. I mean, you guys would know more than me as far as, how he would fit in the league. But one thing that struck me is that, defending sometimes 4 guys, and especially if he gets in the NBA, would he be able to handle defending a 4 who's going to take him out to the perimeter a lot? That could be an issue, I would think. But he's made some progress there. Whether or not that's enough of a liability I don't know. But he's really good in offensively and in a lot of ways, really. And I think he's a low maintenance guy. He's quiet, and he's kind of got this dry, funny sense of humor about him. He's not, he's going to be easy to deal with for anybody. Tommy Lloyd says he's really coachable. I think even Sean Miller did back in his freshman year too. But yeah, again, I'd be curious what you guys think. How does he project?
Well, yeah, I think foot speed is definitely, I think what's holding him back. Where does he fit? He really doesn't project to be a rim protector. So that means he's going to have to play the 4. He certainly has the passing and shooting to do that. And I think when you look at the 4s that are in this particular draft class, assuming he stays in it, he doesn't have to, he can remain in school. But, I would think he'd have one of the better shooting touches out there of all power forwards. And he's also in my opinion, a very underrated passer. So,
It's true. Yeah.
It all comes down to guys like him, foot speed, and how if you can't protect the rim, even if you can, they want you to guard on the perimeter. But if you can't protect the rim, you got to be able to stick. He'll be matching up against guys like Jeremy Grant of Portland, and guys Cam Johnson of the Phoenix Suns, and Mikal Bridges of the Suns. So those guys are very athletic, because right now the NBA, a lot of times their 4 is what we used to call a 3. So he is in that tweener spot. Foot speed will be key, but I think as long as if he can knock down his threes and be a good passer, I think there's going to be a role for him.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think so too. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he develops this year. He's already an all-conference player, but there's things which is great on this level, of course, but there are things he needs to prove, like you're speaking of as an NBA prospect, whether it takes another year, maybe even another year after this.
Right.
And then, which would be great for Arizona as well as possibly for him. And I know, and he also seems like the kind of guy who would be okay with that. He's kind of a loyal guy who seems to be enjoying himself in college. And, we'll see. It'll be really interesting to see how he develops that way. Because I had wondered, could he carve out a role, and how does that work?
I think we're looking at a second round prospect, but I think we're looking at I think there's a good chance that he could be drafted. I mean, we're the only ones saying that right now, but they'll probably catch up to us later. In my opinion. So we're going to ask you about 5 guys. I think we've talked about them all so far, but I'm going to break them down into groups, because basically our draft board goes like 900 deep, but we only publish the top 200. So right now, Omar Ballo, Pelle Larsson, and Kirk are on our top 200. Kirk Kriisa is not far behind. So of these 3 more veteran guys, do you personally see any of them having an NBA future?
Well, I mean, they would all be kind of borderline as of a year ago, but I think Larsson is interesting in that he's so versatile, and he's a tough guy. He can just do a lot of things well. I could see him maybe fitting in a utility role with somebody. I think Ballo really is already, at least again on limited amount I've seen him this year. I mean, he already looks like a different player, and he was getting better last year. Mm-hmm. But he is a true big, and we all know they're rare species in the NBA, and not quite the rim runner that Christian Koloko was, but maybe is developing in some ways like that. He's certainly, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with him this year. But, I think certainly anybody who could use a piece like him, that could happen. But he might need another, this year and next as well.
We're talking down the road, not necessarily them coming out this year. One thing that impressed me about Ballo last year, of course, same with Koloko, even more so, was there. When they were on the court together, somebody had to play on the perimeter usually, and I was really impressed. Ballo's a huge man.
Yeah,
and I was really impressed with his ability. I saw Nicholls State. Now, keep in mind, I only watched half of a half, so a quarter of the game. But I saw Nicholls State trying to get him, isolated and try to get him switched on to one of their guards and try to take him off the dribble, and they had a little success. But my point was, maybe I'm just kind of have this Arizona bias, but I felt that Ballo, really moved his feet pretty well for such a huge man on the perimeter.
Yeah, I think he's made a lot of improvement there. And it's been, he's he is a 4th-year college player at this point. He kind of gray-shirted, so to speak, at Gonzaga, didn't get in or didn't formally enroll, or so, I don't know, there was some kind of academic issue as well, and he wasn't ready anyway. Then he barely played for their COVID year team, and then he came here and just got following Tommy Lloyd, because he bought into that, that track of development that he was on with him. And as last season came on, he played more and more. And this was, and that was just him creating the need for him to play more. I mean, they didn't have to have him play, but he became really an asset for them. And this year, you're right, you're seeing that. And that's interesting about the footwork, because of course, that's one thing I think that got Koloko in the league, was that, you could switch out on him. And I remember Oregon really tried that a lot and late in the game. And he had Will Richardson on, and he defended Will Richardson going down to the post, and Richardson couldn't get up a shot, and he just stay with him every step of the way. And you're seeing, Ball is a different player, and he's an even bigger man. But yeah, maybe some of that translates. It certainly, if he could, pick some of that up, you could see he could be a really interesting guy to deal with down the road.
So, in the next group that Rich was kind of alluding to, guys like Adama Ball, Henry Vesar, and even Kylan Boswell, not many guys are talking about these players, but we kind of project them to be future stars for Arizona. Could you see any three of those players taking their next step this upcoming year and making a significant impact?
Yeah, I think this year, I think Adama Ball probably, I think Vesar and Ball really, will have a big impact. And I think it's interesting, because I think if Tommy Lloyd was watching, he'd probably not be happy that you and I are saying these things, because I think he likes the fact that these guys are a little under the radar domestically in the U.S. And that way he talks about this a lot in general, how he doesn't like all the hype that these guys get domestically. He doesn't like them reading about themselves. And then he says a lot of times it can turn into pressure. But I think, and so he's not even talking a lot about Ball and Vesar, just a little bit here and there when we ask him. But just from what I've seen, I think that, Vesar is going to be the third guy in the post. He can play the 4, the 5. He's got some ability. He just has a lot to learn about the game and, and how it's going to be called, and not getting turnovers and things like that. They've had some issues there. And I think, but Ball has been with this team already. He's very young for a sophomore still, but he's been with this team already and learned in the system. He played a little bit more under pressure last year in the Pac-12 tournament when Kerr Kriisa got hurt. Made a couple key shots, even against UCLA, I think, in the final. And, he's shown some confidence. He threw up, I think he was 3 for 4 or something against Nichols the other day, and from 3, and had a 1 4-point play where he took a foul and fell down and it was fading away, hit the 3 and then hit the shots, foul shots. So, impressive guy, I think, and he's got some skills. I remember reading, he played for France's U20 team over the summer, and he was coming off the bench, which surprised me because his stats were really good, but I think they liked that. He was kind of like this energy scorer guy off the bench, just kind of keeping them afloat. And there were some write-ups about how, how ridiculous he was, with his length and his scoring ability. And that's kind of, I think that more of that is going to come out this season. I think he's going to be the top wing guy off the bench, and, might even get some spot starts here and there.
Yeah. The reason why, obviously Boswell was, top 30 recruits, so we're on to him, but the other guys, we talk to people in Europe and they're very, very high on both Vesar and Ball. And they're about the same age. They're both about 18 and a half. So one last piece that we haven't talked about is Courtney Ramey, who didn't play in the opener because he's suspended for a silly rule because he played in the Portsmouth Invitational last spring. So where do you think, I'm very familiar with Courtney's game, and I would suspect he's going to start, but does that mean Cedric Henderson moves to the bench? Is that the plan? And how do you think he'll fit in? One of the things I was really impressed with against Nicholls State. Now, again, I didn't see the whole game, but I was really impressed for a game one, how well the team moved the ball. And of course, Courtney should be able to, add to that, being a combo guard.
Yeah, I think the plan, from what it sounds like, is that Ramey is expected to start at the 2, but also play a lot of point when Kriisa's at the bench, and even, in Tommy Lloyd's offenses and several cases that's somewhat interchangeable anyway. They're going to be initiating either one of them. But I think Kreese is still the number one point, but Ramey can play too, I think, because of his experience and his defense. Frankly, he's a really good defender, as I'm sure that they need that on the perimeter as well. And I think the way they've been seeing that, they even let us into practice once where they had a first team and Henderson's on the first team, but there's 6 guys on the first team, and I think that's how they're treating him. Is he's going to be a guy who probably comes off the bench a lot, but might end up anywhere between 18 and 22 minutes a game, depending on how they need him and how the matchups is, because he's a guy.
I was going to say, because there's Henderson's significantly bigger than Ramey.
Yeah, and especially out here, there's a lot of those kind of hybrid 4s in the Pac-12 that are 6'5", 6'6", and asking Azuolas Tubelis to guard those guys is not easy. So their best option in a lot of those cases is to have Tubelis at the 5 and have Zed Henderson, or even Pelle Larsson did this some last year. Those guys move in and guard the 4. That can happen. So I think both of those guys are super important. But I think as far as to this team, as far as starting, it would be Ramey.
So my thought, when we're talking about Ramey, and again, keep in mind, Boswell's not draft eligible because he reclassified. So he isn't someone I've paid a ton of attention to. But I'll tell you what, when I was watching him, he was the first guy off the bench against Nicholls State. I was really impressed with his speed. I was really impressed with his aggressiveness on defense and his passing. So the reason why I bring that up is, if you describe Courtney Ramey, you would think, the first thing that comes to my mind is speed and aggressiveness on defense. Yeah. So I see some similarities there. What kind of, we talked, about Ball having an impact with Boswell, at least the other night. Of course, we're talking about Nicholls State, was Boswell being the first guy off the bench. Is he going to be the odd man out when Ramey comes back, or?
Well, there is a lot of upside with Kylan Boswell, and he's definitely going to be in the rotation. He's going to be a factor. He might be a big factor by the end of the year. I mean, he was a 5-star player in the class of 23, reclassified. And the other reason he's, a little maybe not where he's going to be right now is he broke his foot in April, and he literally he only got cleared, I think, about the 20th, 25th of October. So he, to play fully or something like that. So he basically didn't have a preseason. Plus he's, because of his reclassification, he's 17 years old until I think April. So he might be the youngest player in Division I. I mean, it's insane. So, and you look at him like
he's the youngest guy on our draft board, that's for sure.
Yeah,
but like I said, he's not draft eligible, folks. So don't get too excited.
Yeah. So he's good, and it's interesting what you say, because he is pretty quick and he's a good passer and tough. But you look at him versus Ramey, and Ramey looks like that prototypical, super aggressive, quick defender. And what Boswell looks stocky. I mean, he's half Samoan. He's got like his grandfather on his mom's side played lineman for Illinois in the 80s. I mean, like he's a big dude. So, there's that side to him, but he's deceivingly, got some of those real, he's really athletic, I think, and it'll be interesting to see. I think it's just with him, it's just a matter of how fast can he adjust to college. He's not supposed to be here. He's supposed to be in high school. And how fast can he adjust to not having a preseason and not knowing Tommy Lloyd's system? There's just a lot. So I think Lloyd, again, probably more so even than with a guy like Adama Ball, Lloyd wants to not put pressure on him, not talk about him, just let him do what he does. And I think what happened against Nicholls is Ramey was suspended, and then Kirk Kreese goes out and gets 2 fouls in the first 2.5 minutes. They had to go to Boswell. So he actually played a lot more than I think they wanted him to. But it worked out probably pretty well for all parties, and kind of got Boswell's feet wet, which will be interesting. Maybe help him down the road. They are Ramey will be eligible when they go to Maui in over Thanksgiving week, and Boswell probably won't be playing that much at that point. But the fact that he's maybe going to get some good experience in these first few games, maybe helps him get ready.
So all in all, when everyone is available to play, what are your expectations for the team this season?
Well, I think I think probably, certainly they should be top 4 in the Pac-12, probably 2. They could easily win it, but you got to go with UCLA because they got so many guys back, and then bring in those couple of 5-stars in, and they're unbelievably talented. So, but you never know. There's always the X factors, the injuries. And last year, after COVID was supposedly over, UCLA ran into a bunch of COVID. So who knows? Maybe that comes up again or something. So you never know. But Arizona should be in that mix for a title if they don't win it. And then I could see them at least going to the Sweet 16 again. You never know. Matchups, of course, and everything play a role in that. But they should be good enough that they get a pretty good first weekend site somewhere, a preferred site somewhere nearby, and then anything goes after that. But that it should be, I don't think they'll be quite the team they were last year, but I don't think any of us expected them to be quite the team they were last year anyway. So you never know, but I got to think they'll be just a tiny bit down from what they were last year.
All right, Bruce, the last question before we let you go, and this is something we talked about last year, but you just made a point while you were talking to Mav that I forgot about. Arizona is participating in Maui. They open up with Cincinnati and that, and they're also participating in that tournament in Vegas.
Well, it's just a one-time challenge game with Indiana.
Oh, is it? That's just okay. So, all right. So my question was going to be, because they could end up playing some significant teams at Maui, but obviously Cincinnati is. Cincinnati's should be okay this year, but they're not Cincinnati of old, So if, depending on how it shakes out at Maui, right now the only 2 impressive non-conference opponents on the schedule are Indiana and Tennessee. And as I said last year to you, now if you keep in mind, we talked just before the Pac-12 tournament. So, and I was kind of like, damn, UCLA, Arizona, they just didn't play hardly anyone outside of conference. And this pattern seems to persist with the Pac-12. Now, depending on how Maui shakes out, they could end up with like 2 really tough games in addition to Tennessee and Indiana. So that would be ideal. But if not, if something shakes out the other way, they might only have Tennessee and Indiana on the schedule. What is it about the Pac-12 that they don't seem to want to challenge themselves out of conference in the preseason?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. One is, I think when you got Maui, you've got to brace. When you schedule Maui, you don't even know who your first game is going to be. So you've got, especially now that Chaminade's only in it like every other year, you don't even get that possibility half the time. So I think you got to just brace yourself for that's going to be 3 probably tough games. And then they had the Tennessee game. And then they did add Indiana. I think, and I think they didn't know. They knew they'd have a lot of new guys. So I think they wanted to go a little bit softer. But I think maybe arguably they could have added 1 higher level game than they have. But and the other piece of it is that they went to 20 games, and so there's only a hand, between your MTE and your 20 game league schedule, there's only 6-7 games you can kind of mess around with. And, most of these coaches are on the conservative side. I think interestingly, Tommy Lloyd is coming from a perspective of, and he's kind of trying to reassess this right now. Like, where does he go? Because he comes from Gonzaga, where when you're at Gonzaga, you have to load up. You have to load up in the non-conference. You don't have a choice. In the Pac-12, you might want to tweak it down a little bit because you're going to get your butt kicked most of the time, once you get into those 20 games. So it's, I think he's been a little bit on the cautious side, but between that and the fact that he had so many new guys this year, and,
right.
And a lot of these games did get decided late after they realized they lost all those guys. And then that's when they decided to add Nichols and I think Southern was already Southern was actually Pac-12 assigned that to him as part of their SWAC legacy series, they're calling it. But they did tweak it down just a tiny bit, I thought, with a game or 2.
Well, I think what really concerns me, as someone who likes to see the Pac-12 do well, is that the conference just doesn't, Colorado doesn't look like it's going to be great this year. Utah doesn't look like it's going to be great this year. Arizona State and USC should be pretty good. Yeah. But they're certainly not top 25 team right now. So I guess that's what concerns me is if you lose to Indiana and Tennessee, and then, even if you win the conference, it might not be, even if you ran the table this year, beside UCLA, I don't know if any of those wins are really going to impress the people who do the seeding.
No, that's been a big conversation. I think it's actually a little better now than it has been in previous years. They've actually had an initiative where they have somebody with the conference, a deputy commissioner who works with them on scheduling. And if you're way too soft, they do try and put pressure on you. And their stated goal is, I believe, in non-conference, they want you to schedule so that you win 75% of your games, meaning that you're gonna schedule some tough ones that you're probably expecting to lose, a quarter of them. And that's sort of the goal. And I think, Arizona's probably, again, maybe just a little bit soft, but generally they because they're going to Maui, and they did add Tennessee and Indiana that they're going to have a pretty tough schedule as it turned out. But that's definitely been a year. You schedule all those games, and most of these coaches don't like to play cross conference games after January 1st. So you lock yourself down. If you don't play anybody tough, the whole league gets locked down to like the number 6 power rating or whatever as a conference. And you're right, you can't elevate much from that. And that's been a big issue, and they're trying to work on it. But again, I think going to 20 games made it tougher in a way, because it locks the conference into more games with itself, and at the same time takes away 2 spots for non-conference that coaches could use to beef up. So they're in some cases reluctant to do that, and so you've really got to be careful here. I mean, in fact, that's also affecting the non-conference. Like, for example, how they're getting to 20 is what they're doing is they're wrapping 2 games. They're keeping their 18 game, the traditional schedule, starting around New Year's, and then they're wrapping 2 games around the football championship in early December. So that comes at a time when you normally might want to have play Illinois or Kentucky or whoever, but you've got to play these 2 Pac-12 games. And in Arizona's case, they're not too difficult this year. It's at Utah and California at home, but still, those are games where most coaches are going to want to put games before and after that are on the easier side. They're not going to want to play Tennessee and then go straight into playing at Utah. The
problem is with that, in the computer rankings right now, the good schools, Arizona and UCLA, are rooting like hell for everybody in the conference to win, because if they don't, if Cal doesn't go out and win, if Utah doesn't go out and win, if Arizona State doesn't go out and win, that's going to water down their conference victories. And sounds crazy, and the only way you get around not being in control of your own destiny is by scheduling tough up front.
Yeah.
And I know this not only as a sports writer, but as a former computer programmer. Right. I know how these programs
right. And the problem is the conference wants to do that. The ADs want to do that. The coaches in a big picture want to do that. But when it comes down to that coach having to schedule that game, if he has to schedule Tennessee against and then play Indiana or Cal even 3 days later, no, especially early in the season, they've got to work their rotation. They got to get their freshmen up to speed. Coaches want to be careful, and that's understandable. Right. But it's in the aggregate. Yes, everyone gets tougher, but in the individual sense, sometimes that's really hard to do.
Right. Well, Bruce, I want to thank you so much for visiting with us. I hope you enjoy the game tonight, and we always love having you on the show. And I'm hoping you come back and visit us again, maybe around March Madness.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, Bruce. Enjoy the game tonight.
We'll have a lot more to say. I mean, a lot of question marks about how these guys are going to develop.
Oh yeah, your team is one of the more interesting teams out there because of the mix of veterans and all these quote unquote unknown potential stars.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Bruce.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Bruce.
Enjoy tonight.
Thanks.
All right. So we appreciate Bruce's insight, and now we're going to move on to our stock report, and this is going to be a regular feature, and basically we're going to be talking week to week about players whose draft stock is actually moving up or moving down. So first one on our list is a player who anybody who follows the draft is very familiar with, and that's Emoni Bates, player reclassified last year, was the number one guy in his class, decided to reclassify, went to Memphis, had a poor season, also had some injury trouble toward the end of the season. Then he decided to transfer back home, close to home at Eastern Michigan, and he got in some trouble off the court, legal trouble there. That's been settled, and so he played his first game with Eastern Michigan against Michigan, and Eastern Michigan battled that team the whole way through. The only player who really looked good for Michigan was Hunter Dickinson. Bates, to me, definitely, we had discussed multiple times about his draft status. This is a guy, when he first declared, that was rated a top 10 player. He moved down the draft boards, as he played poorly, but he was so young. You certainly didn't want to write him off. And even now, he is still one of the youngest guys in this draft class. So Bates had a really good game. He played 34 minutes. He scored 30 points. He shot 63% from the field. He was 3 of 6 from 3-point land. Made 3 of 5 foul shots. Had 5 rebounds, and that was it, except for 3 turnovers. So no assists, no steals, no blocks, which is concerning, though. He definitely didn't totally hog the ball. He definitely, there were some passes. I can particularly remember one bunny that was totally blown where he should have had at least 1 assist. So it wasn't a total ball hog, but the one thing that this reminded me of is when I was watching Anthony Edwards. I can remember seeing Anthony Edwards go off at the Maui Classic in the second half against Michigan State. And the way Bates played kind of gave me those feelings again. And I'm not comparing Anthony Edwards to Emoni Bates. I'm just saying, my thought was, as I was watching him, is that guy's a pro. And you hear that said a lot, but it's often said way, way too much. But I really believe that he is a pro, at least in terms of scoring. Can create his own shot. Yeah, I mean, that's the most impressive thing for a guy who's 6'8", roughly. He definitely has that shot creation. And so he a 6'8" guard. That's pretty impressive. So what do you think, Mav? Were you impressed with Bates?
I agree with you. I with your offensive, he looks like a polished offensive professional player, and at his age, it's pretty impressive, especially coming out of pick and rolls. I saw a couple of times he would come off and have like a little drag dribble into a mid-range shot, and even a pull-up three-pointer. I mean, pull-ups, step backs. He kind of has all of that in his arsenal. I still have a lot of concerns. I'm kind of a pessimist when it comes to Emoni Bates. His physicals are very concerning to me. He's not exactly an athlete. He's not big. He's not a passer. He tried to play point in Memphis. That was a failure. Now, he was very young. He was a year younger than even a freshman in college. And now he's technically a freshman in college playing a second year in college. So, yeah, I can give him the benefit of the doubt there. And he looked great offensively. And I think, before I couldn't see him having a role in the NBA, but now I do. Now I kind of see a volume score kind of out of him at 6'8", 6'9". Someone who could really come in and be a microwave, maybe off the bench. I don't really think he's a starting level caliber player. But even a guy like Jordan Clarkson, who's really just going to come in, shoot a lot of mid-range and three-point shots, who's going to play more off the ball, not really anyone you're going to look at defensively, not someone who you're going to rely on to pass. I think that type of role Emoni Bates could fill very well. And at his height, could be a mismatch on a nightly basis for NBA teams for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. So he's definitely improved his draft stock. I think he's moved into first round range for sure. Next guy on our list is a freshman, and and that's Gradey Dick. He is leading Kansas in scoring. He came in known as a shooter, and he is not disappointed. He's made 5 of 10 threes through 2 games, so he's shooting 50% from 3, though he's only shooting 67% from the foul line, which is interesting. But been doing other things, like he's averaging 1.5 steals, 4 rebounds. I mean, this guy, too, has good height for a shooter at 6'8". So, I'm impressed with him. And I don't know if it's enough. We talked about Kansas being overrated last week. We're going to find out soon, though, when they take on tonight. They take on Duke, yeah. So have any comments on...
Yeah, he's a professional level shooter. Just like Emoni Bates is a volume shooter, Gradey Dick is a professional level spot-up shooter, and it looks like he can do more. Very impressed by him. And since we're talking about Kansas, Jalen Wilson has also been very impressive too.
Yes.
So
But
we'll talk about that more later.
Yeah, sure. I agree. Jalen Wilson, been playing very well. He too is, we have him in second round range. We have Gradey Dick now in first round range on our draft board. Next guy up was the Duke freshman that impressed me the most in their first game. I did not see their second game, but the guy who impressed me the most is Mark Mitchell. He's a 3/4 forward, another 6'8" guy. But he's now shooting 50% from the field, 50% from 3, perfect from the foul line so far, 4 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1 steal, and 0.5 block a game. So, I really think that Williams wasn't, despite being a top 30 recruit, he was probably the least talked about guy in this recruiting class. But as I said, game 1, that didn't include Derek Lively, who was out with an injury. He did play some in Duke's second game. Williams was the guy that stood out for me. One guy who is absolutely going ballistic is Jaylen Clark of UCLA. So Jaylen Clark is the guy that basically kept Peyton Watson on the bench last year. They're very similar type of players, defensive oriented, considered defensive stoppers but Clark, so far, now this is only 2 games in against light competition, but this guy is just going crazy. He's averaging 17 points a game, shooting 67% from the field, 54% from 3-point land, 1,000%, 100% from the foul line, 8 rebounds a game, 3 assists per game, 4.3 steals, and 0.7 blocks. This is just tremendous. I must admit, I haven't seen Clark play this year yet, but these numbers are fantastic for a guy who we saw the athleticism, we saw the defense. The question was, could he contribute offensively? And so far, the answer is yes.
Well, we talk about people taking the next step, and Clark last year averaged 6.7 points per game. And now he's at 17.3 points per game. So he didn't just take 1 step; he took 7 steps. It's statistically, it's incredible how he looks.
Yeah. So the next guy we're going to talk about is Jett Howard, Juwan Howard's son. We talked about him a little bit on the show last week, and I referred to him as a polished player, one of those players that doesn't look like a freshman. I will say he was fairly quiet against Eastern Michigan. But overall, he looks the part. He looks like he's going to be Michigan's second best player. He's shooting 41% from three, 44% from the field, 4.5 assists per game, a steal a game, 1.5 blocks per game. So I'm impressed with Howard's. He doesn't, he's better defender than he looked in high school. He's also been contributing in multiple ways, and can create his own shot. And I think maybe he should stay another year, but if he doesn't, I think right now, if the draft took place today, I think he'd be a second round pick. Another guy is a guy who has kind of been on our draft radar forever, and seemingly he's a senior now. And that's Terrence Shannon Jr. We've always known Terrence was a good defender. We always knew he was a tremendous athlete, but he's been bothered by injuries, his last 2 years at Texas Tech, and was kind of like, one night he'd look okay, and the next night he'd disappear. He really seems to have his explosiveness back, in terms of speed, vertical, and I think playing in Illinois, a little more wide open system, than he played at Tech. He's flourishing there right now. He's averaging 23 points a game. His 3-point percentage isn't great, and he's never been, it's right around his career average of 35%. He's getting to the foul line an unbelievable amount, and always been a decent rebounder, but this year he's been excellent, almost averaging 7 boards a game. And also he's averaging close to 4 assists per game, which is something new for Shannon. So he seems to be finally healthy, and hitting the potential that we always saw in him. So the next guy on our list for stock rising is Connecticut big man Adama Sanogo. He was selected to be the Big East preseason player of the year. And he's been doing a tremendous job for a Connecticut team that's missing 2 of its top 3 players, with the one exception being Sanogo. And he's averaging, always known for being a big, powerful man inside, and he still is. And he's averaging 23 points per game. But the nice thing is he's developed a outside shot, and he's making some threes this year. So that's great news. Also averaging 10.5 rebounds a game. The one thing with Sanogo, he's never been a top flight shot blocker. He's not huge. I think he's only 6'9". And he's only averaging a block per game. That's a number you'd like to see higher, but it just never may be in the cards for Sanogo. He's also averaging a career high 1.5 assists per game. So definitely is improving his draft stock. Next on our list is Josiah James. And to me, I don't know about you, Maverick, but to me, he was the lone bright spot in Tennessee's loss to Colorado. And what I liked about Josiah, he's always been an all-around stat sheet stuffer. And he's clearly always been one of Tennessee's best perimeter defenders, if not the best they have. But he's always been really shaky from three-point land. But his shot all of a sudden looks pretty smooth. And I mean, we're talking about, if he can keep this up, he can really improve his draft stock with all his other tools.
I mean, he's career high 3-point attempts at 6.5, and he's shooting a blistering 46.2% with his defense and still stuffing the stat sheet. I mean, yeah, talk about lone bright spot. The lone bright spot.
One guy I'm so happy to have on this list is Keyontae Johnson, the former Florida forward wing. I'm not sure, probably best classified as a small forward. always had, I mean, even when he was a freshman, he had an NBA ready body. And he suffered the heart issue, myocarditis, which according to everyone wasn't related to COVID. But the funny thing about COVID is he did catch COVID. Florida was kind of having COVID problems back then. And one of the more serious symptoms of COVID is getting myocarditis. So yeah, it's weird, but he didn't, he only played 4 games the year he suffered the heart issue in 2020. Then he basically only appeared in a game last year, but he didn't actually play. He just was like in there for less than a minute. That was just so he could have a senior night at Florida. And but now, in his super senior year, he is at Kansas State, and so far everything's looking good. He's averaging 30 minutes a night. He's shooting 48% from the field, 57% from 3, 83% from the foul line, 5 rebounds a game, 2.5 assists. Now, I will say that some of these numbers aren't up to his standards at Florida. I mean, he was another true stat sheet stuffer. That's a tongue twister. So some of his numbers from his peak season of Florida in 2019-20, he's not quite measuring up to those, but his shooting percentages are looking good. So especially from deep. So we shall see. We wish Keyontae the best, but so far so good. So the next guy on our list is a little jitterbug from UAB. And I don't know, it's Jordan Walker, and I don't know if he has the size to make it in the NBA, but he certainly has the ability, the shot creation, the handle, and the shooting accuracy to make it at some professional level. But right now, it's only 2 games, but last year he averaged 20 points per game. Now he's up to 32 so far this year, and shooting 45% from deep, which would be a career high. And he's still, his assist numbers are a little low. I suppose you can't. It's only so many minutes in the game. He's only averaging 3.5 assists, where last year he was close to 5. Also 3 steals per game. Jordan Walker is a player to keep an eye on. A really fun player to watch if you get a chance to check out UAB. As I said, NBA seems to be a long shot, but definitely will play professionally somewhere. And last on our list, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. He's shooting 45% from 3 on 10 attempts.
Right.
That is wow.
Yeah. And UAB has some talent. They're gonna challenge for the Conference USA title. And so we might see them in March Madness. So the last guy on our list is Ohio State's Zed Key, who happens to be our next guest. Our next guest is Ohio State junior Zed Key, a power forward who is averaging 15 points and 11.5 rebounds per game for the Buckeyes. Zed, we're really excited to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. Is there snow on the ground out there?
No, it's raining. Thank you. Thank God. Because with snow, we all would be panicking, but it's raining. It's raining.
All right. My first question is, Ohio State's website lists you at 6'8", 255. But when I've been watching you this year, you look lighter and quicker on your feet. Did you drop or redistribute some weight in the offseason?
I dropped a little bit, and it's a mixture of both. I dropped a little bit of weight and redistributed. I'm down in body fat right now, and I'm able to run longer, move a lot better on the court. So it definitely has helped performance wise on the court. Moving around, and gaining muscle mass and losing a couple pounds.
Good, good. So it's not my imagination then.
Yeah, no.
All right. All right. I'm going to pass you over to Maverick for the second question.
Hey, Zed, first and foremost, I just want to say I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, I mean, in the preseason AP and the coaches poll, I mean, the Buckeyes didn't make the top 25. And here at Who's Prospects, we had y'all ranked number 26.
Mm.
And even after, I mean, 2 pretty impressive wins, the team still remains unranked. And y'all lost starters, E.J. Liddell, Malachi Branham, and Jamari Wheeler, I mean, plus a pretty valuable reserve in Kyle Young.
Mm.
But at the same time, though, y'all got back a healthy Justice Suing, added transfers Isaac Likely, Tanner Holden, Sean McNeil at the guard, and along with that, y'all brought in the 8th ranked recruiting class in the country.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you feel like y'all are overlooked? And if so, what are they overlooking? Because I think that y'all have a very talented roster up and down.
Yeah, we have this conversation every day as a team and with the coaches. We just we surprise people. They always count us out every year. It's been like that since my freshman year. Even though I think my freshman and junior year, or my sophomore year, we were ranked in the beginning. But it's because we have a lot of new faces. So they're like, okay, how is the team going to gel? How is the team going to play together? But within the first 2 games, we've played really well together, and it looks like these new faces have been on the team forever. So I just tell the team, just stay with the course. They'll wake up eventually.
Zed, you look over the roster, and Isaiah has been known for years as a lockdown defender. And I'd say Ohio State of late has been considered a strong defensive team. You also bring in Tanner Holden, who's a great all-around scorer, Sean McNeil, knockdown 3-point shooter. So what would you say the team's strength is? Is it defense? Is it offense? Is it balance, depth?
It's crazy because we have depth coming off the bench. We're very versatile. So we have a lineup that's very like a small ball lineup, and it's like this team's the Big Ten that can't do that.
Right.
We're very versatile at each position, and and we're a very balanced team, as you said. Tanner Holden, defense, ice. Coaches they stride and tell us we got to be good on defense. Defense win games, championships. So we got to hang our hats on playing defense. So we take that every day. We work on defense every day, and we work hard at it.
So again, when I was looking over the roster, and I hope I get Felix's last name, it's Akapara.
Yeah, Akapara. Yeah, you got it.
Hey, got it. All right. So it seemed like you guys are the only 2 real viable 4/5 guys on the roster. Is that something that has been discussed, especially in the Big Ten, where you have guys like Hunter Dickinson and Zach Edey? Have you discussed how you're going to deal with guys like that?
I think we'll be fine. He's 6'11". He's a really good shot blocker. He's a rim threat around the rim. Lobs. He can finish around the rim. He's really good at finishing. He's really good at blocking shots, as we've seen in the first 2 games. He's rim protector for sure, and he's a really good player overall. So I think, we'll definitely be fine.
Okay. All right. I'm going to pass you over to Mav for the next question.
Well, currently Felix is one of 4 freshmen who are playing more than 16 minutes a game for y'all. Mm-hmm. The others being Roddy Gale, Bruce Thornton, and Bryce Sensabaugh. Mm-hmm. Could you just briefly describe what each 4 of those freshmen bring to the table for y'all?
They're each individual in their own way. Bruce, he's a really tough point guard. Very strong, can shoot the ball. Very smart with his decisions on the court. He doesn't play like a traditional freshman. He looks like he's been out there for a while on the court. Bryce, he's a really efficient scorer. He gets to the spot. He's really athletic. People don't think that a lot about him. No, he's really athletic, and he can shoot. As I said, he can shoot the ball really well. As I said, Felix could jump out the gym, lob threat. block shots. Just a really good post player. And Roddy, also very athletic, as you've seen in the Bahamas and our little blacktop event that we had. Is good at getting to the rim, finishing. So, we have a class of really good freshmen that came in, and they are willing to work really hard to to get better every day and make an impact on the court.
In terms of your game specifically, you're shooting 80% from the field. You rank at the 95 percentile in points per possession. And by the way, when I was looking at that today, I was like, who's in the other 5%? Is there somebody out there shooting better than 80% from the field? So it's obvious that, you've expanded your game. For example, you've made 2 3-pointers this year, 2 of 3. And after having no attempts in your first 2 seasons. So how confident are you in that outside shot at this point? It looks good to me. And what other tricks do you have up your sleeve for this season? I mean, I already know you can go right, left, with finish with either hand, with hooks. You also, obviously a tremendous rebounder, but is there any other new aspects to your game that beside the outside shot that we can expect to see as the season progresses?
I'm not gonna say too much because for just want to surprise teams, but I've been working hard. As you said, with the outside shot, that was a big emphasis this summer. To develop and get better with the outside shot and be confident in it when you're shooting in games. And I'm confident with where my shot is right now. And when I'm open, I'll continue to shoot the 3. So. It definitely shows, the hard work that you put in and that you're confident in the work you put in.
Yeah. And it looks good. The shot, that is. All right. So I'm going to pass you over to Mav for the next to last question.
Yeah. So your schedule is going to get, it's going to get pretty interesting. You're going to open up in Maui for San Diego State.
Yeah.
And then you're either going to play after that Arizona or Cincinnati.
Yep.
And then as soon as you get home, then you got to go to Cameron and play Duke. So first question, how excited are you? To go hoop in Maui? All right. And then what is your expectations for that stretch of games coming up?
I'm really excited to go to Maui. It's not cold out there. So that's one big. And, I love Hawaii. I've been to Hawaii once my senior year of high school for the Aulani Classic. And, I loved it out there. It was really nice, mountains, the scenery, the people, obviously the beach, because that's obviously the island. But, I'm really excited to go out there and, play the 2 or potentially, I think it's 3 or 2 really good teams with my teammates and go out there and show the world.
Yeah, Maui's loaded this year. And how weird would it be if you played Cincinnati in Hawaii?
Yeah, it would be a little weird. I'd be like, okay, we could have just scheduled a game with y'all, and y'all would have games over an hour. But it's good. It shows the caliber of teams that are in this tournament. So it's really good tournament.
Should be really fun. Fun to watch too. So last question. I hear that you can fix car engines. How did you get into that? And are you interested in auto racing?
I've always been around, like cars and stuff from growing up. Grandfather, father. We usually fix our own cars. So I had my own car at 15. It was a little fixer upper, and got rid of that one, and I bought another one, and then so I still have it, still in New York to this day. That was one of my first cars. I don't think I'll ever get rid of it, and it's like a passion. It could sometimes become bad because it's a very expensive habit, but
right.
It can get really expensive quick. But it's I love the passion. There's a lot of people out there in the world who share the same passion, and it's good to connect with them. Yeah. And auto racing, it's something that crossed my mind, but I think I'm too tall to be in these cars. Some of these cars.
Right. No, I meant. Are you just like as a fan? Are you interested?
Oh yeah, I definitely watch it. But F1 for Formula One, and
that's what I was about to ask you. I'm a huge F1 fan.
Yeah, Formula One. I'm not really I don't really know like the people like that. I don't really watch it like as much, but I watch it a little bit. If it's on, I'll watch it. NASCAR. I really don't watch NASCAR like that, but I've seen like stuff on Instagram and social media about it.
Right. If you have Netflix, check out Drive to Survive.
Okay.
It goes through the whole season, and you really get to know the drivers. And
yeah, I definitely checked it out. I do need some search for some new shows
I'm telling you, you start watching this and you'll be addicted. So do you have any other hobbies? Any other hobbies besides working on cars?
No, that's pretty much the main hobby.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. That's a great hobby.
Pretty much the main hobby.
Cool. All right. So I've been telling my son, he just graduated. He's still a couple years older than you. He just graduated with a degree in engineering. And I keep on telling him to look into working on cars in F1, because the mechanics make like $1 million a year.
Yeah.
So once you give up basketball, you could consider becoming an F1 mechanic.
Yep, because I'm not fitting in those F1 cars. So.
Yep. All right, Zed. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We wish you the best this season. Have fun in Maui, and I think it's going to be a great season. I guess we should ask. What are your expectations for the season? I mean, what are your goals as a team?
Team, obviously we've talked about this already. Big Ten championship. Everyone's goal is to win. The NCAA championship, but we want to be top 25 in defense and offense. We have some goals, and they're achievable. So we come into practice every day ready to work towards those goals.
All righty. Well, hopefully they'll start recognizing you guys and put you in the top 25, because I think you deserve to be there.
Yeah, it's okay. They'll wake up soon.
All righty. So thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So that was great talking to Zed. Now we're going to go on the other side of the coin. I'm going to talk about stock falling. Now, we mentioned Oregon. And our first player is Kel'el Ware, the highly touted freshman. Kel'el joins Oregon, who already had 2 other 5-star recruits as centers. So that's one of the reasons why we weren't too high on Oregon, because you can't play 3 centers at once. They have Nafali Dante, who's been with them for a few years, and he's more of a traditional shot blocker, rebounding type, who you probably haven't heard about a lot because he's been injured a lot. They also recruited last year Nathan Biddle, who was a 5-star guy, and now they bring in Ware, another 5-star guy. They all can't play at once. He's only shooting a 7'1" guy, or 7-footer. I don't know. He's around that range. And he's only shooting 30% from the field. Not good. So
he's trying because he's shooting two threes a game. He's just shooting 25% from 3. Right. So he's trying to fit in. At least statistically, he's trying to fit in. But I mean, like you're saying, you can't have 3 high-level bigs playing at the same time and expect.
And they're not, because they're not doing that. But I mean, the whole point of it is Oregon doesn't have much beside these big guys. And they can't all play at once. So, and the thing I will say about Ware is, everybody, before these kids get to school, every 7-footer is a unicorn. Okay. And then they actually play against good competition, and we learn that they're not so much unicorns. And what I will say about Ware, though, is though he is his game is mostly like a traditional center, but he has a pretty shot, a really pretty shot. And I do feel that he will eventually develop into a nice stretch 5. But obviously he's got a ways to go. And if he comes out this year, and if he's not going to get a ton of playing time, and I don't think, So I don't know. I don't know why he chose to go to Oregon when they already had two big guys that were highly touted. But yeah, we shall see. But right now, his draft stock is taking a dip. And his teammate, Will Richardson. Now, Will Richardson's he's super senior, and he's been, again, one of those guys that's been probably on our draft board since his freshman season. And he's just never quite, his sophomore year was probably his best season. But even then, he only averaged about 11 points per game. And this year, so far, his numbers are dreadful. Now, admittedly, he doesn't have a lot of help at the wing and backcourt positions, but he's on 6 attempts per game from 3. He's averaging 17%. From the field, he's shooting 29%. He's averaging 4 assists per game, but also 4 turnovers per game. So for a super senior, these numbers, especially since Oregon so far hasn't really played anybody, these numbers are pretty dreadful. And Will Richardson, he's already, in my mind, already, a borderline second-round pick at best.
Yeah.
It's not looking good for him. All right. Now, here comes one of Drew's boys, Harrison Ingram at Stanford. Came out last year, 5-star, highly regarded. To me, I wasn't impressed with Ingram's game last year. He just looked too slow, too plodding. I mean, you could see that there was talent and skill there. I just wasn't impressed. I thought he's one of these guys that definitely has to get in better shape. Or maybe he's just not that athletic, but he's definitely strong. But the athleticism is something I'm worried about. But also his shooting numbers were not, they were pretty bad last year. 39% from the field, 31% from deep, 66% from the line. Yep. And this year he's doing even worse. I mean, I saw them play Wisconsin. They needed offense badly, and he was just nowhere to be found. And right now he's averaging 6.5 points per game. So this is a 5-star guy who a lot of people were projecting to take the next step and be a first-round pick. And I'm telling you right now, he wouldn't get drafted. Or if he did, he'd be one of the last picks in the second round. Ingram still has all these guys have plenty of time to turn it around, but we're just trying to point out who's doing well and who's not.
He's putting up 6 points a game in 31.5 minutes. I mean, that is
for a Stanford team that's desperate for offense.
Exactly.
I will say that Stanford really doesn't have a great point guard. That's a problem with that team. There is talent there. There's Spencer Johnson, who's a nice wing, who's also in our top 200. They have Maxi Renaud, who is a very talented French center. Still raw, but I could definitely see Renaud definitely being an NBA draft pick a year or two from now. Not this year, but a year or two from now. But so there is talent on that team, but it's just not coming together right now. So the next guy is Matthew Cleveland, and he was one of several Florida State sophomores or juniors. Now, we know Florida State under Leonard Hamilton, usually nobody gets to play huge minutes, and there's a lot of in and out of the lineup. He likes to play 10, 11 guys. And Cleveland was supposed to take the next jump. And the big problem with him last year was he couldn't shoot, and he didn't look like he had the aptitude for shooting. And someone told me over the summer, he doesn't look any better. Someone also told me over the summer that Ben Simmons didn't look any better. So my sources tend to be right. And right now, Matthew has yet to make a 3 this year. He's not even bothering. He's only taken 1 attempt. But the problem is he's shooting a decent for a wing, 47% from the field, but he's only averaging 8 points a game, and he's supposed to be the star of the team. That's not first round pick territory. He's only shooting 55% from the foul line, and the rest of his numbers are dismal for somebody who's playing 28 minutes a game. I'm not going to go through them all. And he's also averaging 2.7 turnovers per game compared to 0.7 assists per game. Yeah. So Florida State has problems up and down the lineup. And like I said, they're really thin in the front court, but they do have a lot of wing types, guard types. But Cleveland is supposed to be the star in this team, and he is anything but right now. I can't. Those people who are projecting him as a first-round pick should update their draft boards.
And for someone who's a wing that relies so heavily on getting to the paint and not shooting, he's shooting 54.5% from the free throw line. That's 1% less than last year, which I think is also a good indicator that your sources were correct. Right. That he doesn't look any better, because he didn't even bother to improve his free throw percentage, and he obviously came into this year not looking to shoot.
Yeah.
So
it's my source was right. So the guy who was another top 30 recruit. So Duke basically had 2 top 5 recruits, and then they had 2 guys that were in the 20s. And one was Mark Williams, who we mentioned, Mark Mitchell, who we mentioned earlier in the show. And the other was combo guard Tyrese Proctor from Australia. And he really looks like the odd man out. He's playing plenty now because Duke's had some injury problems, but when Dariq Whitehead comes back, I think Proctor is going to be the guy that's going to be on the bench.
I agree.
And also, who's Duke's hangover point guard?
Jeremy Roach.
Yeah, Roach is playing well, and so but Proctor's playing right now 23 minutes per game, and he's only shooting 8% from the field. Hasn't made a 3. His assist turnover ratio isn't bad, 2.5 to 1. That's nice. But right now he just doesn't offensively, he's contributing in other ways, rebounds, steals. So that's all positive. And I'm not writing Tyrese Proctor off at all. I'm just saying that, he's a lot of people were, again, another guy who's projected to be a first or second round pick. And right now it doesn't look like this is the year. I think he should wait till Roach graduates, then take over as the lead point guard, and, just use this year as a learning process and don't rush it. One guy, I really didn't understand this, and we'll see Kansas tonight, but one guy that really confused me, that people were talking about as being a second round pick, not a first round pick, but a second round pick, is Kevin McClure. Now, Kevin is a super senior who played 4 years at Texas Tech, was always known as being a hard-nosed defender, good passer, decent rebounder, things of that nature. But career-wise, he's not even at 30% from 3, 43% from the field. And those numbers are, even more dismal now that he's playing at Kansas. Also, he's only playing about 23, 24 minutes per game. So I don't know what people were thinking with Kevin McClure, but to me, he's not a disappointment. But he's certainly not NBA material. I didn't think he was at Texas Tech, and I don't think he is at Kansas. So moving on down the list, and one of my stories, if you've listened to the show last year, was when I went to scout Isaiah Mosley last year. I believe it was early in the season, maybe mid-season, but Isaiah was on a tear last year. He was averaging 20.4 points per game for Missouri State. And he's a very talented scorer and shot creator, and he can rebound. Not the most intense defender, but this guy's a scorer. He's wired to score. And when I went to watch him for Missouri State, he didn't really do much for the first few minutes of the game. The coach pulled him and never put him back in the game. So no explanation was given. And the only thing I don't know if it's for, defensive, not putting an effort on the defensive end of the court, or taking poor shots, because he is a volume shooter. But right now, he hasn't gotten a start for the Missouri Tigers, who are not loaded with talent. I thought Isaiah Mosley would be their best player this year, and that's been Kobe Brown. Now, Kobe Brown is a steady big who actually, Kobe Brown's also on our top 200, but Mosley, I thought, wow, now he's going to get a chance to play in the SEC. He's going to really, he could definitely, be a solid second round pick. But right now he's averaging 15 minutes a game and 4 points per game. And he hasn't made a three yet, shooting 44% from the floor. I think they'll come around. I think Isaiah Mosley will eventually start, but it seems to me, he's either difficult to coach, difficult to get along with, or maybe he just does things that really irk coaches. But right now he hasn't earned the trust at Missouri, and he's spending a lot of time on the bench. All right. So another guy we're going to bring up another UAB player. Who thought we would be talking about two UAB players in the same episode? And that's Eric Gaines. And if you watched LSU over the last 2 years, Eric has mostly been a bench player. Fantastic speed. I mean, it really stands out when you watch Eric, how fast he is with the ball. And it's just, he's never really been an efficient scorer. He improved last year, and we expected, hopefully, that you would expect going to UAB and not playing such a, tough schedule, that those numbers would even improve more. But right now he is off to a really rough start. So last year he averaged 9 points per game, 39% from the floor, 25% from three. Now, he's always been a good foul shooter, and he shot 79% from the free throw line last year. Mm-hmm. But, this year he's shooting 35% from the floor, and he's averaging 5 assists per game, but he's also averaging 4.5 turnovers per game. So, yeah, Eric is obviously new team. He's got some adjustment process. But the thing that we really wanted to see from Eric is not only him becoming more of a floor general, which means he's got to cut back on those turnovers, but we wanted to see the shooting percentages come up. And right now, none of those things are happening. So another guy who was actually projected by people as a solid second round pick, not looking that way. And the last guy we're going to talk about is the mullet, Matthew Meyer, who played for Baylor for 4 years and transferred for his super senior year to Illinois. Matthew has flashed some unbelievable talent. If you watch him on the right night, you'll say that guy's a first round pick. He's athletic. He can shoot. He can handle. I don't know if he's a stellar defender, but he's a decent defender. But right now with Illinois, again, another guy with a new team, he's struggling to make the adjustment. He started all 3 of their games, but he's only averaged 16 points or 16 minutes per night, per game. And he's only shooting 32% from the field, 25% from 3, and he hasn't made a foul shot yet this year, which, it's an underrated skill. But getting to the line is 3 points, and guys who can do it, that's what professionals do. They want to get to the line. Think about Harden and Embiid. So he hasn't even taken a foul shot this year. So, Drew said last week on the show that he thought that Meyer was just one of those guys who's going to flash once in a while, but there really wasn't a lot of substance this year to him. He didn't have a lot of faith in him, and maybe Drew's right. But right now, Matthew, I think there was a time when we considered him to be a late first round pick. I think most people thought he was at least going to be a second round pick this year. But right now, I say he's fallen out of, draft range.
And we thought that he'd have more opportunity too at Illinois during our preview. And
right. Just like Terrence Shannon. Right.
Exactly. And he has not taken advantage at all. I mean, yeah, pretty rough. Pretty rough.
I will say this, the mullet's gone, so he looks a hell of a lot better. So, all right. So that wraps up our stock report. And now we're going to get to the fun part of the show. We're going to make some predictions on tonight's games and other big games for the rest of the week. Tonight we'll start with the big games tonight in the Championship Classic, Michigan State at Kentucky. Who you got, Mav?
I'm going Kentucky. I'm going to go Kentucky. And just straight, going to out-talent them, in my opinion. I think Michigan State has a good team, but I don't think they have that star. And I think that Kentucky will just simply out-talent them. But shout out to Michigan State because they played a great game against Gonzaga. I just don't see them winning against Kentucky.
Yeah, I've seen Kentucky play. I've seen parts of both of their games this year, and that the depth on this team is just downright scary. And the thing of it is they've been rocking and rolling without the reigning player of the year. Now, I don't know if Shigwe is going to play tonight, but I know he's getting close. I know he's getting close to playing. But, I mean, they are too deep everywhere. The other thing is Damian Collins, who we interviewed, about a month ago, 5-star guy who didn't play a lot. And we thought he'd be, in the mix this year. But unfortunately, his father passed away. And so he's still spending time with his family. And again, I don't know if he's going to be available tonight. But this team is rolling. It is loaded with pro potential. I will say the one guy Cason Wallace, we talked about him already a lot, and he's impressed me. I think he's going to be a great pro. I think he's pretty much a lock to be a top 10 pick. But one is unheralded freshman, Ugonna Onyenso. This guy is super young. He is barely 18 years old, barely. And he's on the thin side, but man, this guy just has talent. He's so quick for, I think, is he a 7-footer? And he's 6'11". It's really quick feet. I could see him being a tremendous defender. And obviously he has a raw offensive game. He hasn't been playing basketball a ton. But he's averaging 3.5 blocks per game. And he's playing less than 20 minutes a game. The guy is just incredible. But anyway, I am going with Kentucky. If Calipari doesn't screw it up, I'm thinking this team actually should win the national championship.
Yeah.
All right, we got a tougher one this time. Duke and Kansas. Who you got, Mav?
I'm going to go Kansas. Okay, I'm going Kansas this game. I think that Gradey Dick is a phenomenal shooter, phenomenal player. And Jalen Williams looks like he's going to have a breakout season. We had some concerns in our preview. And just like I was talking about before, I'm going to talk about it now. I mean, he's averaging 20 and 10 with 4 assists. He looks fantastic. And this is going to be Duke's first real test, especially with their first year.
Kansas is too.
Yeah, but I think that Kansas has a little bit more to lean on versus Duke, which is why I have Kansas tonight by like 5. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's a good game, but I think I'll have Kansas on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see this game going down to the wire. I've gone back and forth on who I think's going to win, but I'm going to go with Kansas for the same reason you said. They got more. They don't have a ton of returning. Okay, they don't have a ton of returning upperclassmen, but they have a couple, including Jalen Wilson, and the guys they have unlike Duke, who's mostly freshmen. At least Kansas has, they have a lot of sophomores actually that were with the team last year and at least, have some experience. So I'm going to go with the experience here. I'm going to go with Kansas, though I think Duke has more talent, but I'm going to go with experience. All right. Now, Gonzaga at Texas in Austin. Who you got?
You see, this should be a home run. Gonzaga, they still have Drew Timming, they still have all the talent. But I'm going Texas. I watched that game and I was disgusted by the spacing with Gonzaga. I just could. And now you have Texas, who has length, scoring. I mean, they have a great recruiting class. I'm going Texas at Austin. I'm going to go with Texas. I just can't get over the miscommunication and spacing. I know it was better in the second half against Michigan State, but that's against Michigan State, a significantly less talented roster than Texas has. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go with Texas. I think it's going to be kind of like a wake-up call for Gonzaga a little bit, and we'll see. Now, my only thing is, if they can figure out the spacing and they can really get Malachi Smith specifically more involved, where he's not running into 2 guys every time and really utilize his scoring, that's going to be a key. But for right now, I don't see that happening.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm going with Texas too, for basically the same reasons. Texas still isn't clicking on offense. They're trying to incorporate some new pieces. But I think they have enough bodies to throw at Timmy. Michigan State seemed to run out of bodies to defend him. And as I said, when Matty Sissoko, went out of the game, that's when he got in foul trouble. That's when Gonzaga was able to make their comeback. So I'm going to take Texas at home as well. All right, now we have an interesting matchup in the GAVA games of Indiana at Xavier. Both teams we talked about, we were worried about who's going to play point guard for these teams. Indiana has basically been using, they have Xavier Johnson, but they've also been using freshman Jalen Hood, who's played pretty well. Not great, but yeah. So, and Xavier also is kind of still searching for their point guard, but both teams are undefeated. Both teams have looked good so far. So who you got, Mav?
The more I look at this Xavier team, the more I like it. And especially during our preview is whenever I was really introduced to they're more of like a core 4. Mm-hmm. And we talked about a lot with their additional shooting. And I think I'm going to go with Xavier. My gut's telling me Xavier, but it's probably going to be a pretty close game. What do you think?
Oh yeah. I think Trace Jackson Davis is playing a little banged up. He's got a wrap on his shooting hand. Colby Jones, who's already was always a stat sheet stuffer, is now taken over as the lead playmaker on this team. He's averaging 7 assists per game. And we predicted that Kobe would take over a lot of the playmaking role, and doesn't seem to be affecting the rest of his game. They have the 2-headed monster up front with Nunji and Fremantle, and then Soli Boom the transfer has just been tremendous. Kai Tandy is playing some at the point, and he's been playing well. He's shooting the lights out at 57% from deep. I like Xavier at home. We have not disagreed yet. It's like you're reading my mind.
I know.
It's like we talk basketball all the time. All right. So now I believe this next game's in Vegas. It's part of a doubleheader on Friday. We have Virginia versus Baylor. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna go Baylor on this one. And I'm going Baylor because it's because of Keyontae George. I'm sorry. I have to go with the big time player. And I know that Virginia is historically a great defensive team, and they're going to try to slow down the pace. But man, can Keyontae George play, and man, can he run an offense. Right now, he's been a little inefficient. I believe he's shooting. He's shooting 42% from the field and 36% from three. But this is a guy who's averaging near 7 assists, 6 rebounds, 16 points a game. He's almost averaging. He's about averaging 1.7 steals as well. I think that right there is the difference maker. So yeah, give me Baylor. Give me Baylor for this game.
All righty. Again, I agree. I watched Virginia's game against North Carolina Central. They actually played at a pretty fast pace. It wasn't the usual Virginia, slog it out game, but they also only won by 12 points. A lot of the guys, the returners that were kind of had lackluster seasons are picking it up for Virginia, like Amon Franklin and Reese Beekman. They played well, but Virginia, it seems like they're actually kind of speeding it up, not playing the normal, But from a pure talent, Virginia has the edge, certainly has the edge in experience and maybe even depth in this game. But I like the overall talent of Baylor to prevail.
Yeah.
All right. So now moving on, we have Villanova. This is another Gavitt game, part of the Gavitt games. We have Villanova at Michigan State. So notice this is Michigan State has already appeared in one of our games that we talked about as one of the big games of last week, but now they appear twice on our list of big games of this week. Michigan State's point being, Michigan State's got quite the schedule.
I think this is our game we're gonna disagree on. I have here Michigan State. But I'm going to change my answer to Villanova, and here's why. There has to be some sort of sense of desperation coming from this team now with a pretty embarrassing loss and a pretty close game that should not have been close.
Which I actually think was more embarrassing.
Yes. This has to be the game where they come.
Delaware State didn't win a game in their conference last year.
Yes. And especially for another first year head coach, you have to come out and show that you belong. And listen, Michigan State is a good team, but they don't have a star. This is what we talked about before against Kentucky. They don't have a star, and it's a winnable game, and it's a meaningful game to win. So I'm gonna go with Villanova with the hope that they come out with a sense of desperation to showcase who they are as a team.
You're right. We're going to disagree. I've watched Villanova my whole life. And of course I've become spoiled with Jay Wright, and this team looks nothing like a Jay Wright team. They're missing their two best players, and Justin Moore and Cam Whitmore. Now Whitmore is getting close. He had surgery on his thumb, so he might show up for this game. But even if he does, I still think they're going to lose. It is at Michigan State for starters. And, until they figure out who they want to play. And the thing that really bothers me is they do have some like 4- and 5-star talent sitting on that bench. And if they ever needed to play freshmen before their time, now is it, but they're not. And I'm speaking specifically of Mark Armstrong, who I mentioned earlier, Trey Patterson, who's barely gotten off the bench in 2 years. This is the second year of Villanova. So they need some spark in shooting and athleticism. And this team just looks dysfunctional right now. All right, so last game. This is another one of that event in Vegas, I believe, and so it's on a neutral court. We have Illinois versus UCLA.
This is gonna be a good game.
Yep,
It's gonna be a very good game, and a lot of people should be tuned into this game. UCLA looks very good, and especially with Clark, I think it's going to be a 3-4 point game, and I'm going to lean towards UCLA. And especially if they're going to still continue with the Matthew Mayer thing. I know he only plays 16 minutes, but if they're going to continue starting him and he's just not going to contribute anything, that's 16 minutes of someone who could contribute that they're not taking advantage of. So I'm going to go with UCLA on this one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Even though Amari Bailey has yet to, really take off. I mean, the 5-star guy, they haven't needed him because they already have Tiger Campbell, Jaime Jaquez, who what you're going to get out of them. Now you throw Clark in there, who's looking like an All-American. That's the UCLA side. Meanwhile, you have Illinois, who is searching for their point guard, and they're basically using a 2-freshman system, between Sky Clark and Jaden Epps, at running, basically splitting time at the point. Coleman Hawkins, he's a guy we could have added to our stock rising list. He's a 6'10" power forward who's shooting the lights out. They have Dane Danger, transfer center from Baylor, who's been playing well for them. And of course, my boy, RJ Melendez, who I talked about multiple times, he's not even playing well yet for Illinois. So Illinois so you have Melendez and Meyer, they're not even playing very well for Illinois. So Illinois at the end of the year, they could be really tough. But right now I'm going with UCLA. So we only disagreed on one game out of all those close games. We only disagreed once.
And the disagreement was with your Villanova Wildcats, man.
Who I am very worried and concerned about. All right. Great show. 2 fantastic guests. No time for the mailbag this week, folks. But we'll get to your questions next week for sure. And if you'd like to send us a question, please email it to admin@hoopsprospects.com. I want to thank all of our listeners and also our special guests, Zed Key and Bruce Pascoe, who are excellent. We'll be back next week with another stock report. Plus, we'll have a special feature on the Villanova Wildcats with Villanova Wildcats insider Eugene Rapé. So, folks, that's it for this week. We'll see you soon. Do you hear anything? Have anything funny to add at the end?